Being able to properly master motion trackers is probably going to be the #1 biggest time-saving skill you can learn. And with Silhouette version 6, there are even more nodes where you can start to use motion tracking data. But we're going to be looking at the motion trackers within the Roto node. But these exact same motion trackers can be found within Depth, Morph, and a number of other Silhouette nodes, including, of course, the Tracker node, which is only motion tracks. But let's have a look at how they work. Now I have 3 shapes that I've drawn here. I've got step bottom, step top, and my rear post here. And I've placed them within a layer called Ladder 1 layer. Let's come over to my tools and come to the trackers. And in the tracker tab, you can see we have 3 different types of trackers available to us. We have the point tracker, a planar tracker, and mocha tracker. But we'll start by looking at the point tracker. Now the first thing we have to do is create our point. And that pops up in the center here, and it's a standard point tracker. Let's move this over here so you can see this a bit better. So we have 3 elements to it. We have the center cross here, which is the center point of the tracker, so where the data is going to be applied to. We have a inner box here, which is our feature box. So this is the shape that the tracker is going to be looking for. And then the outer box, the dotted box, is our search area. So that's where it's going to be looking for the feature shape within the next frame. So this is the search radius for it. A larger search radius means it will look for that shape in different places. So if there's a lot of movement, you've got a bigger chance of it being seen, but also a larger chance of false positives coming up, because this particular cross here in the window looks very similar to this one over here and this one over here. So keeping your search area as small as possible is not only going to make the tracker slightly faster, but also more accurate. Let's turn off the alpha overlay. We don't want to see that right now. It's just going to be distracting. And let's find the correct point, or the best point, for our point tracker. Now, because I want to track these shapes here, it's best to try and find a point that is on or close to this particular object, especially when there's parallax involved. If we have a look here, you'll see there's a moving camera, and it's very likely that the windows in the background are going to be moving in a different way to the ladder in the foreground. Probably moving at a different speed because of parallax. So let's try and find a good point here. Now, what makes a good point for a point tracker to track? What we're looking for is something with a good amount of contrast and a clear shape. Something like a corner point is nice as well. But how would we find that? Well, let's have a look at the pre-processing so that we can see what it is that Silhouette is going to be seeing. So if I start to turn up the contrast a little bit, hopefully, and maybe even the sharpen, some features are going to start to shout out to us. So we have a nice point around about here. If I put my feature over this, you can see it turning up in the small viewer window there as well. So what makes this a nice point? Well, we've got a good corner point shape data, and we've got some contrast for it to lock onto. We also have this little dot down here. We have a unique shape in the search area, contrast, and edges. So that's going to be quite nice. I'm going to turn my preview off now, and I'm going to start to track this. Now, we always want to start from the best point of tracking. In this case, it is the first frame, because this is where the object is the clearest, and we can track this forwards, or 1 frame forward, or track this backwards, or 1 frame backwards. Let's just track that forwards, and as that goes through, you can see it's having no trouble finding the point until maybe at the end as it goes off. Yep, and you can see right at the very end there, it's not quite hooked on to the shape because that's gone out of screen. But that's not to worry, we can just do that ourselves and move that around about here. And I can use my Z and X keys to see whether that is actually lining up okay. A little bit too far over, so I'll just shift that over a little bit there. If we scrub that using the X key or the Z key shortcut, What I'm looking for in the point tracker here is I'm looking for a solid or steady object, because that means that our tracker is going to be fairly steady. And that's looking pretty good. And we could smooth this out a little bit as well to take out any little bumps and bops in there. This is a destructive process, so the only way of going back to it is to use the undo. And if you've saved it with the smooth on, that's it. You can't go back to the original data, you'll have to retrack. But that can just help just to take out any of the small amount of noise and bumps that are going on in a particular track. Cool, now the only thing left to do is hit apply. And when we apply this track data, we're applying it to a layer. We aren't applying it to objects. We can only apply this to a layer. So if you don't have a layer, you will not be able to press the apply button. Now, because we've only tracked one point in, we can only do a position match move. If we had 2-point tracking, we could also do scaling and rotation here as well. Let's hit OK. And if I come back to my transform tool here, and we'll just play that forward. And you'll see that that is now moving my layer and all the objects within it according to my motion track. Now, if there is a little bit of drift or a little bit of parallax data that we didn't take account for, because this isn't just a simple left to right move, there is actually some parallax data going on in here. We can animate these shapes up. And because we've got that track data applied to a layer, we can animate the shapes independently of that layer. And we have a look at the layer itself and come into transform. You'll see the only thing that's keyframed up is the matrix, which means that we can still animate up position, anchor, scale and rotation independently of the track data. And this is very important if you want to use this track data for doing anything different, such as match moving or stabilization, because it gives you more parameters to be able to smooth out that move without losing the underlying track data. And that's a quick look at the point tracker. If we look at the planar tracker now, we come to this second clip here. We move over here. The planar tracker works in a slightly different way. We do need a layer still, and I will call this one boxes. And we do need a shape. But instead of using a single point to track, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a shape that defines a plane. So it defines an object with the same relative distance, relative movement to the camera. So we've got a plane here, we've got a different plane over here, we've got a different plane over here. But these things here, we can say they are co-planar because they all sit on the same plane. Let's make a big one here, because all of this along this area here is actually coplanar. Let's pop into our trackers and go down to our planar tracker. There we go. And now you can see what's happening is that the planar tracker has created a whole cloud of points for us based on our parameters down here and our pre-processing. Let's turn off the pre-processing. We don't need that right now. So just hit reset on all of that and hit reset on a planar tracker. And you see we're getting different track points as well. So it's updating and figuring out where some suitable track points might actually be. And we think they're all huddled a little bit too close. We can change distance up, so that puts a little bit more distance between the different trackers, and we can define our minimum number of features that it's going to look for and the maximum number of features here as well. And we don't really have to do all that much more. I'm just going to hit track forwards on this and watch it as it tracks forwards. And as you can see, it's cycling out track points as they reach the maximum age, or as they stop fitting in quite as well. And let's just play that back. Okay, and that's looking all right. We can even turn off that square that we created to do the track, and we can do individual boxes on something that is on the same plane. So I can come here, I can do one box over here. And because that data has been applied to the layer rather than an individual shape, it's been applied automatically. If we do this, I come in, I'll do one more box So we'll do a set of boxes over here. Turn off the overlay so we can just see the alpha overlay and hit play on that. And you can see, if I zoom in a little bit more, you can see those shapes are all holding nice and steady. Despite being 4 different objects, they're all using the same single planar track. And we haven't had to add a single keyframe. And getting rid of keyframes is really where you can make some huge time savings. And that's a brief overview of Silhouette's trackers.